I'll be right back. I just
All right.
messed up. I just messed up something on my computer.
Okay, welcome everybody to the Constitution class. If you want to jump ahead to about the 15-minute mark, that's when the class is going to start. We're just letting people kind of wander in. If you want to go, Brady, go.
No, I'm good. I fixed it.
Okay. All right, I'll be right back.
All right. Well, hello everybody. Let me get into the YouTube so I can read chat. Oh, there I am. Hey everybody, who's here? Hey Chris. Let's see. Ron leaves me once again to do a monologue, which I, of course, was not prepared for. Got a little bit of interesting news this week. I think I'm going to hold off on the fun story till Ron gets back. Let's see what else is going on. Well, we survived the blizzard here in Southern California. San Diego didn't get it too bad. I bet Ron might have even gotten snow where he lives. Hey, Michelle. I got into a bit of a Twitter spat last night with a guy who's a reporter in Arizona. And I think I won the exchange because I got a whole bunch of new followers and a bunch of congratulatory direct messages. So I had a little bit of fun with that. See, first time I've really gotten down and dirty like that with long ongoing debate, but it was fun. Guy was trying to say that the allegations coming out of Arizona with this Thaler guy, his logic is, well, the fact that the media is not recovering it means it must not be true. And I go, really? Just like Hunter Biden's laptop? Because, of course, they didn't cover that, and it was true. So I kind of blew up that argument and just he wanted to keep defending it. So, you know, I'll pat myself on the back and say I kind of tore him a new one. I was polite as always, but yeah, we ended up having a decent exchange today. It wasn't nasty by any stretch, but it was a butt kicking. Y'all would have been proud. If anybody is on my Twitter, you can go check that out for last night's feed. Oh, I want to talk about this Arizona story so badly, but I want Ron to be on here for it, so I am going to hold off. Well, I was just listening to Glenn Greenwald show on Rumble. He's been going, I don't know how long he's been doing it for, just a few months. Cool. Glad you enjoyed it, Michelle. I enjoyed it quite a bit. What was I going to say? Oh, and then I got done and found a new Spaces, a Christian group, and I just jumped in there and just heard some really wonderful people. Yeah, that's what's funny about that, Chris, is the guy's a reporter, and the guy does really good election reporting. If you want to know what's going on the ground in Maricopa County, he's the best account to follow. But it's going to become with a leftist spin, and he tries to come across as being objective, and he's certainly not. You know, he's a decent reporter, but he's obviously biased, and you know, I just keep trying to get him to admit that, and try to maybe not be so much because he's a good guy. He's a good reporter, and he's a smart guy. I like him. Yeah, there's a reason I follow the account. Anyway, so I was just listening to Glenn Greenwald. He's got a Rumble show. He live streams every day. I forget what time, but I was listening to yesterday's, and he was talking about not just he was really going off about Brazil and how the Supreme Court had given themselves power to basically be judge, jury, and executioner in all kinds of criminal cases, and he's pointing out the trend that more and more around the world, you know, after, you know, we had a pretty good run of, you know, from the Renaissance onwards of freedom of speech. And he's basically telling the story about the trend of how that's changed, and it's changing. You know, you saw the censorship in Canada. We saw it here in America with social media. And ever since, you know, that magical day in January, they started kicking people off of social media platforms. We've seen the Twitter files. We see what's going on in Brazil. But if this trend continues, the next age of humanity is going to be one of authoritarian, um, where the government gets to decide what you can and can't say. That's the trend. And, it really sums up the battle that we're in right now. Let's talk about, Ron, did you hear that?
That was the trend in communist Russia.
Well, yeah, that's always a trend in communism. But
well, that's what they want to turn us into.
Well, something along those lines, yeah. I mean, it's different forms of authoritarianism. That's why I always default to liberty versus tyranny, because communism, fascism, the theology, whatever, not theology, but you know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So, Ron, are you up to speed on the allegations made last Thursday in Arizona in front of the state legislature
about Katie Hobbs being funded by cartels?
Yes. What are your thoughts on
I don't know. Can we even talk about that on YouTube?
Yeah, I think it's out in the public. Not saying we can walk around it carefully.
Yeah, let's try to walk around it carefully.
Yeah, well, first of all, this guy Thaler, who's making the accusations, he's an attorney. Now, he's also making a lot of these allegations against his ex-wife, and they're in a heated custody battle. The last judge he presented this stuff to in the divorce proceedings threatened to sanction him for making some wild, unsubstantiated claims. And basically, what the gist of it is, it's got a bunch of people in multi-states that apparently are using trust deeds in real estate for money laundering purposes. And that's basically what his accusations are. And he says it ties into everything from election issues as well. I started looking at some of the accusations, and the stuff he's saying about Katie Hobbs looks like a normal person who has bought and sold real estate a few times. It's nothing as explosive as he said. I'm going to wait to, I don't want to, judge it before we actually see the evidence. And I want to hear from his signature expert. But yeah, it's sounding to me like this is really not looking like one of the stories we want to run with. Got any thoughts?
I hadn't heard anything of what you just said until just now. So my initial thought was that I wanted to see evidence. I wanted to see something that was substantive.
Yeah, and perhaps we will. Perhaps. Hey, Doug. Just finish up this thought, and then you can take over.
How you guys doing?
Good. I just got to give you guys the heads up. I do have to leave a wee bit early today to beat traffic to get someplace, but I'll stick around as long as I can.
Sure.
Just to finish up. Thought. Yeah. Ron, I think we may see some more of the evidence. What we've seen so far is not looking good. It's not looking like it's anywhere near what the allegations were. But it's interesting because this guy's an experienced. Oh, and by the way, the woman who presented last Thursday, and this guy said he couldn't go because he was under death threats. Apparently, they're dating. So that's another little red flag in there. But my thought is, if you make accusations like this and allegations, then you're setting yourself up for a slander or a libel suit. And this guy's an attorney; he knows better. If he's got nothing, I don't know what the heck he's doing. If he's off his rocker, that's one thing. But he comes across as pretty credible. And I would suggest the one interview to watch was on Frank's speech last Friday on Brandon Howell. Thaler came on and did about a 45-minute interview, and that is very much worth watching. And he said one thing that kind of made me scratch my head. He goes, it's not really my ex-wife because the divorce papers were fake. I go, okay. How do you get fake divorce papers and you're a lawyer? I mean, so this is one I'm just staying out of. Well, I guess not staying out of completely, but I'm certainly not going to. Katie Hobbs needs to go to jail. No, we're nowhere near that. So, anyways, I thought that's a pretty fun story. How you doing, Doug? Long time no talk.
I am doing well. Let's see, early and okay.
Doug is early today. Did you not have a class in Fallbrook?
I had the lunch I had a good meeting. I went by the credit union. I even spent some time talking to my wife. It just, for whatever reason, things flowed wonderfully today, better than usual. So I'm in a good mood. Monica, I thought I was late when I saw Doug. Thanks a lot. Now, usually I get in here in the nick of time because, I'm coming in from Fallbrook and I run through the door and I just have just enough time. Today, the class finished on time. I didn't have a horde of people wanted to ask me questions afterwards. So I had the lunch with people wanted to have lunch with me and I left there like half an hour early. It just was one of those days where everything just went right. And even the traffic on the 15 was lighter than usual. Just one of those days where everything just worked out well. Oh.
Very nice.
So anyway. So good to see all of you. How you doing? Got the chat room rolling already. For those of you who watch this show and you also attend the San Juan Capistrano class tonight, Carrie in particular, who I haven't seen Carrie in a while. She hasn't been in class the last few weeks. She's had other things going on. But Mrs. Pistachio, Mrs. Constitution, whatever you want to call my wife, she's going to be at the Capistrano class tonight. So she decided she's hungry and she wants to come with me to the class. So there we go.
And if I know Doug, there's no way you'll make it through the class without getting her mad at you because you managed to pull it off again on Sunday.
What? I don't make her mad at me.
Of course you do. I've seen her.
I irritate her. She rolls her eyes. I don't make her mad.
Mean husband. Just so you guys all know, and I do
it on purpose, though. See, that's the thing.
I know you do. You're playing fun with her. Just so you know, I got to see Doug and his wife on Sunday because I had a very special occasion. Hi, dogs. I got baptized on Sunday, and Doug and his wife are nice enough to attend. And it was a really wonderful ceremony, and the ocean was colder than a witch's you-know-what.
Usually when I get Virginia to go someplace, I lure her with food, but baptism of Brady was enough of a lure, so...
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Really good group of people.
Yeah. Well, what was amazing about the baptism was, number one, that Brady chose to be baptized in the Pacific Ocean in February. Colder than the other thing that was amazing about it is after baptizing Brady and walking up to the sand, the gentleman who conducted the baptism then threw his shirt off and jumped back into the water. You're crazy. Not because it was cold, but also there was a storm. God knows what's floating around in the water out there from the sewage drains, or I'm sorry, storm drains.
Well, we actually had, that was actually a conversation about, are we sure we want to go into this water after the really heavy rains? But we weren't in there that long.
Yeah, and obviously viruses have time limits just like they have distance limits. But anyway, not that I should get too deep into that. I like to keep my shows on the air. So, I'm talking about that thing from a couple of years ago or a few years ago. Anyway, all right.
I'm just waiting for the Department of Energy to get their YouTube channel banned because, they're what they came out with over the weekend.
No.
Lab leak theory. No, the Department of Energy came out and said, we think it's the lab leak. Now, of course, that's all a distraction to keep us from talking about other things because that's stuff we already knew.
Lab leak?
Yeah. They're saying that the virus, the came from a certain city that had a certain facility, but now that's official U.S. policy. They're trying to walk it back, but that's all everyone talked about on the Sunday shows.
Interesting.
Wow. Yeah, I think I agree with Dan Bongino. What he said on Monday was that that's just his whole show is this is a distraction. Don't fall into the trap. Why are they bringing this up? Something we knew 3 years ago. And to change the subject as always.
Well, it's sort of like a magic show and a circus at the same time. You get your bread and your bread in your show, right? The bread and the circus, but then also you get to smoke and mirrors. So, so it's really interesting. I never knew that magicians and circuses traveled together. But anyway. All right. Well, it's top of the hour, so maybe I'll break into this thing. I did a video this morning, by the way, and I was very happy with it until I noticed that the sync for the audio was slightly off. and it wasn't when I first recorded. I watched it and edited it, but anyway. So if you go to douglasvgibbs.com /video, or you can just go straight to the video pages, YouTube channel, youtube.com/douglasvgibbs, rumble.com/douglasvgibbs, and bitshoot.com/douglasvgibbs. And you can find the video I did on the Electoral Count Act. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to do another video. I've already got it planned. I've already got my information ready to roll on it regarding eligibility for president, because there's two now particular candidates with heritage, interestingly enough, both of them from India, who are not eligible. And I'm going to talk about it.
I was going to ask about Vivek. I did not realize he was in the same category.
Yeah, he was born in Cincinnati. From what I understand, I don't have the birth certificate and all of that, so I'm not 100% positive, but I believe that his parents weren't naturalized yet at the time of his birth. But nonetheless, I'll get into it. Here's the reason why that video is going to be important to watch, if you don't mind me kind of indulging myself for a moment. There are 5 Supreme Court cases in which natural-born citizen is properly defined by the Chief Justice in that case, in the judicial opinion. I am going to go through all 5 of those cases also on tomorrow's video. Thank you, Chris. Chris says great vid. All right, I say, Chris, I tell you, you're like it. You watch my videos. You're here on MrConstitution.com. You get over to Patriot Soapbox and to Andrew's thing on Friday night. I tell you, you're quite the video watcher, brother. It's good to see you. All right. So that all said, I had fun with the video this morning. It took me with all the editing and everything I did, it took me about 3 hours to do the 22-minute video, but it was definitely worth it. The information I provide, I think, answers a lot of questions for people, and I had to make sure I worded it in such ways because it's regarding this indirectly. What ties into it is the 6th day of the first month of a couple years ago, among other things, and so I had to really be strategic on how I talked about this stuff. But I have a feeling that video might stay on. We'll see. All right, so we are in Article 1, Section 8. Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution. And even though those of you who were last week, you're going to hear a little bit of a replay on some of this stuff, I want to make sure it's understood. I want to make sure it's remembered. These concepts are so important. And I'm late in, I don't know, the last year or two, I have really had so many good questions from students that I kind of now have changed some of my explanations to kind of anticipate some of these ways of trying to understand this. The reason it's not that you have changed or I have changed, it's that what has gone on in the world has changed, and so new questions are popping up because of certain instances that happen regarding our liberty, our choices, whether or not we should be forced to do certain things or not, and so on and so forth. So bear with me on some of the explanations, but some of the stuff I really want to hammer, because one of the things that I want people to understand is really 2 things. These are 2 primarily important things when it comes to the U.S. Constitution. Number 1, enumeration doctrine. The federal government's authorities, powers must be authorized. They must be enumerated. They must be listed in some way expressly in the Constitution. I say expressly. I'm not talking about implied powers. That's a bunch of junk. Expressly enumerated in the Constitution in order for the federal government to have the authority. Yeah, but gosh, Doug, what if this happens or that happens? I understand all of the caveats and arguments and nuances and everything else everybody wants to throw at me. In the end, that's the rules. Let's follow the rules. Now, the second thing that's important is that the federal government was not created to handle internal issues. This is what's so unique about our, to say it in the Brady manner, federal republic. Our federal republic is different from anything else out there because what it does is it distributes power. It distributes authority. So the external stuff, the things that a country's government should be able to take care of, like war, trade with other countries, commerce with other countries, I just repeated myself, maritime law, and so on and so forth, all of that, and anything that has to do with the union, holding together the union or benefiting the union, such as communication between the states, or ensuring that commerce between the states is in good order, things like that. Those are the federal government's authorities. But the internal stuff, the local stuff, localism, that belongs to the states or local communities. We don't want the federal government making the decision on whether or not a stoplight is at the corner of First and Main. That's up to that community or the state. The federal government is a centralized, consolidated, whatever monster who has no clue what's going on in your community, and it's not their job. And they were never given that power. Now, in the Constitution, when I talk about the list, enumerated powers, those expressly enumerated powers, that first list is Article 1, Section 8. That's where we're at. Any other powers given to the federal government is going to be, or Congress particularly, because they're the ones that make the law, are going to be in amendments. That's what the amendment process is for. It is available so that either the states, through a convention of states, can decide to change the Constitution through their own manner and procedures, or for the federal government through their Congress to propose an amendment. In other words, ask for a change of the Constitution, such as an additional power. In both cases, it still requires 3/4 of the states to approve it. In other words, in order to get an additional power, the federal government must, through the Congress, must ask the states, and 3/4 of them must say, okay, we'll let you. There is oversight over the federal government by the states through this mechanism. There's all kinds of mechanisms. And that video I did this morning regarding the Electoral Count Act, that law, which was got all kinds of unconstitutionality mixed into it, is one of those things that is being used to reduce the state's oversight authority over federal activity. That's why it was so important to do a video. They're still chipping away at the state legislature's voice. And this one is done in such a small manner that most people didn't even notice nor care. Of course, most people don't even know how the Electoral College or something like that's supposed to operate anyway. So if you get the chance, when we're done here today, or you're done watching this video later, if you're not watching live, go to Douglas V. Gibbs. I'm sorry, back up, youtube.com/Douglas V. Gibbs, or my BitChute Rumble page, because those ones sorely need subscribers, more so than the YouTube one. And check out the video. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to get up early so I can do another vid, because I really want to do one on Natural Born Citizen. I've got like 4 videos that I feel like are pressing. I want to do one on Nikki Haley and the other gentleman. I can't remember, Vinico or whatever. Ramsey. But anyway, I want to do a video on Natural Born Citizen regarding them. The fact that Biden says that he will veto any abortion legislation that comes out of Congress. And I want to do one on Scott Adams, who is the guy behind Dilbert cartoons. What did he actually say? He didn't say what they're saying he said. He didn't go on a racist rant like he's being accused of. I'm going to do a video on that too. And I actually captured that video in case it disappears, of him talking, so I can actually, from my computer, play it on my video. So I'm not, so now if it disappears, I'm not dependent on that. I actually captured it. But anyway, so I am going to talk about all that stuff. Sorry, I spent 10 minutes kind of talking about that, but I wanted you guys to kind of get an idea of what's going on. Also, I've got, of course, a million other things going on. I've got meetings, I've got classes, I've got websites that we're retrofitting and creating, and all kinds of fun stuff. I'm here to tell you, folks, we are on the verge of really creating some fantastic educational tools regarding restoring the Constitution that'll be good for you, me, all of us. Things that you can use where someone says, well, where does it say that? Here, let me send you to a page where that's explained. We're going to have that at your fingertips. So I'm very excited about some of the stuff that I'm working on, content creation and vehicles to put that content out there. Brady, I can see the wheels turning. You got something to add to that?
Well, no, I've had the pleasure of, helping, or I've got to peek behind the covers of all these new tools already. And
right.
I'm like a little kid at Christmas with some of the stuff we're going to be able to rolling out here. It is going to be a state-of-the-art present production we're going to do. Mm-hmm. I'll have my new channel launched this week with some new content, and I got a bunch of more stuff coming. So be on next Tuesday's show, and I'll promote the heck out of that. And I just wanted to make a comment about Vivek Ramaswamy running for president. And I really hope
that's the name. Yeah, that guy.
I've had to, he's a finance guy. He's in my field, so I've known his name a long time. I've been practicing, but I am really excited to see him on the debate stage. I don't think he's, it's not presidential material at this point, but
he's a hell of a conservative.
He will bring up some topics that most mainstream Republican candidates are going to cringe at. I mean, this guy, he has got his takes. He's got some pretty good, strong takes. This is a good, strong conservative, and he's not bashful. He will. Oh God, he's going to be amazing on the debate stage.
All right, very good. Sounds like you almost described him like when it comes to his debate style, he might be slightly, not exactly, because nobody's exactly like this person, but slightly Trumpish.
Yeah, in a different way. Yeah. There's
not
only
bashful
one
for sure. Okay.
No, but it's the topics he'll do. You're not going to get the same canned answers. And we don't have to. Right. If somebody comes out there and says, "What do you think about preserving democracy?" He's going to give the right answer. He's going to say, "Yeah, he's probably watched your class a few times from some of his stuff." So.
Well, and remember that India, where his roots come from, while it's definitely went off the reservation since, the British Saxon Foundation that built our system is present in India too. They didn't do the same thing with it, which is the reason why we became the power we did when they didn't. But still, they became more successful and prosperous than pretty much most of the other countries in Asia and so forth. But because of that, I believe. But so I have a feeling his whole life he's been hearing a little bit about some of the foundational stuff I talk about. All right. That all said, Article 1, Section 8. So last week, what we talked about was taxation. I'm going to read the clause, but I'm not going to get into deep discussion just for context and so we understand where we're at. So very beginning of Article 1, Section 8, the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. Remember, Article 1, Section 9 indicates that any of those taxes that are on that are on us, that no direct taxation. Go up a little bit.
Did I miss it?
The next one up, no capitation. See where it starts, no capitation?
There we go.
Yeah. So no capitation or other direct tax shall be laid unless in proportion to the census or enumeration herein before directed to be taken. That's, in other words, on Americans. There's no head tax, capitation. You've heard of decapitation. That's where you lose your head. Capitation is where you lose your wallet. Capitation is a direct tax, a head tax. So direct taxation by the government against the people was not allowed. Now, direct taxation was allowed on like importers, exporters, because that's a different animal. And that's what your duties and your excises and all that jazz is, imposts. Now that we've gone through that, the next line is where we left off last week. Now, remember, each of these clauses in Article 1, Section 8 begin with the word to. If you'll notice in the very first clause, there are 5 words in front of the word to. The Congress shall have power. Those words are repeated on each clause, but they didn't write it over and over and over. They just hit to. But the Congress shall have power applies. So I'm going to read it that way more often than not when I go through these clauses. So the Congress shall have power to borrow money on the credit of the United States. Now, on the credit of the United States is important. What it's saying is Congress is borrowing money through congressional means. Why did they feel the need to do that? There were actually people who put their credit up for the government to be able to borrow on their credit during the war. Haim Salomon being one of them. This is on the credit of the United States. So it's not anybody else's credit, on the credit of the United States. In other words, their borrowing history to borrow money. So what that is saying is, yes, the national debt, as we like to call it, I'm not a fan of the word national, but you know what I mean. The national debt is not unconstitutional. They can borrow money. Now, it's interesting because when you read people like Thomas Jefferson, and I know I'm going to get a snicker out of Brady when I say this, and I always do, but you got to remember, this is from their point of view at that time. Thomas Jefferson's attitude was the only time really that a central government should need to borrow money, however, is for war. Everything else you should be paying as you go. You got the money, you have to be up, you budget like the average person. But, when you run your household and you run your finances that way, there are those things that come up that you don't expect. I've experienced that myself lately. I mean, I put in the last 2 months, I kid you not, over $5,000 into a car that I spent $5,000 to buy 5-10 years ago. I had to borrow the money because that's an unexpected expense. So that's what Thomas Jefferson is saying is Congress has the authority, federal government has the authority to borrow money, but his attitude was it shouldn't be just because. It should be only when necessary for like war, because here's where Brady snickers, because it's an unexpected expense. So.
Yeah, you got me on that one.
Boy, I tell you, that one will get a snicker out of him every time. But the thing is, that was the attitude. Now, Alexander Hamilton, being a little bit different minded when it came to money and debt, believed that the national deficit or deficit and debt are actually technically two different things, but that's a discussion for another time, should be perpetual.
And go ahead. Let me touch on that. What Doug's talking about is, and we've mentioned it before, but it needs to be it's a very important point about mercantilism. Mm-hmm. And the mercantilist system it's not capitalism whatsoever. It's crony capitalism. It's what we live under today that they call capitalism, but it's not. It basically, they want the government spending money on what they call internal improvements and protective tariffs, where the rich people, the corporations that are closest to the government, meaning they put their people in place in the government, are able to get government contracts and to build improvements. That would be railroads, canals, everything like that back in the day. These days, there's it's military contractors, etc. But the protective tariffs let these people basically protect them from competition. The competition is a sin. That's what mercantilism is. This is the economic system the founding fathers fought a bloody war to get away from. They crossed an ocean, fought a war to get away from. And Hamilton wanted to reimpose it upon us. And he ended up being successful. Really, when Abraham Lincoln came in 1861, it's when we really became a mercantilist country. And we have been ever since, where these really rich corporations or wealthy people are able to put their hand-picked politicians, and they then use the government to reward themselves and bring up barriers to entry so competition can't come in. And it's a terrible economic system, and it will always eventually implode, and that's what we're seeing today. We are not a capitalist society right now. We are a mercantilist or crony capitalist, and it's probably one of the most important things for us to fix once we become aware of it.
Yeah, it's a big part of Hamilton's original curse.
Absolutely.
All right, so getting back to borrowing money. So borrowing money is constitutional. They can have debt. One of the reasons that Hamilton also gave for wanting a perpetual debt was because he believed that was one way to hold the country together. That he said in a statement one time that states would be less likely to secede. Now that's an interesting statement, and I'm going to kind of go off.
Perpetual debt. I show you.
What's Ron cooking up?
I show
Well, you got to remember that when it came to banking,
okay. So that book was written by somebody who went back and looked at all of the archives
Mhm.
and essentially makes the claim in a very boastful and glamorous way that Alexander Hamilton was raised as a Jew.
Now,
And
my PSA regarding Ron's response is that I'm a firm believer that there are segments of societies that do very bad things, and that includes the Jewish community. But that doesn't. But I hate it when people say, "Well, the Jew." No,
I'm just saying he
which
was
group?
raised as a Jew.
There are factions. I'm a firm believer that every group has its factions.
I understand that, but when you have when you have a gross overrepresentation by one community at the top levels of every single facet of society, that's a problem.
Well, one of the things that is interesting is, and this is a sidetrack before I get back on the other sidetrack I was going to go after, is that from a biblical standpoint and from the belief system of the Puritans and the Calvinists and many of those Protestant religions that were around at the time, it was sinful to loan money and charge interest.
That's right.
When loaning money to another Christian.
That's called usury.
Right. But if you need to borrow money and you can't borrow it from your fellow Christians, your whole community is Christian, what do? Oh, the Jewish guy is willing to loan me money because I'm not, so that's kind of, be honest with you, that's a part of why they became the bankers in many ways. There's there are other facets and all this, and there's other mechanisms,
which is one of the reasons that if you go back and you look through history, that segment of society has literally been kicked out of almost every country. Anyway, I digress.
The real origin of the story of the money lending in semi-modern terms was Venice in the 11th and 12th centuries, and of course they were Catholic, and therefore can't have money lenders. But the Doges, or that run by about 13 elite families, and there was a Jewish population there that they hired, the ruling class hired to do their banking for them, so they wouldn't get in trouble with the church. Same thing happened in the Arab world because usury was illegal with Arabs as well. And it was a natural niche for a sizable chunk of the population.
Now, and then the question, and then what happens is when you allow someone to control the money and in that fashion, eventually they do become very powerful and very rich as a result. And when someone becomes very powerful and very rich, sometimes certain groups will then begin to throw that weight around, so to speak. And then they don't exactly make friends. They also don't make friends when a lot of people owe them money. And the best way to get rid of owing anybody money is to get rid of them anyway. So there's a number of reasons why in some cases where that particular group was exited from their...
As the quote goes, I care not who makes the laws, give me control of the money.
Yeah, something along those lines.
Yeah, he who holds the gold holds the power.
The Venetian ruling class specifically used their Jewish bankers as scapegoats for anything. Anytime the population got mad, they would point the finger at their henchmen and say, "Don't look at us. We're not the ones doing it." But they were absolutely that's really well documented. In fact, even Shakespeare touched on that in The Merchant of Venice. That's how well known that was at the time. Before we go on, Ron, who wrote that book that you showed us? Who's the author?
It is Andrew Porwanker, Porwancher, who is of that heritage.
He's a wanker. He's of the wanker heritage. Gotcha. I have not heard of him.
Yeah, but he talks about all the schooling and everything that because there really isn't a lot of history around or like documented history about Hamilton. But what he has found all points to the fact that he was raised Essentially, he was raised Jewish.
So Tracy asked, "Can you say the J word on YouTube?" Yeah, you
Yes.
can say jab. You just can't go any further. Oh, you meant the other J word. Oh, sorry. Okay.
And just FYI, just so that there's no misunderstanding, I don't have I have a problem with a mentality. I don't necessarily have a problem with individual people. And
Right.
but you all know that. Well, the audience may not know, but you guys certainly know that I do not consider modern day Israel as the equivalent of biblical Israel. So
yeah, I'll back Ron up. He's not
It's a
saying,
political entity, but yeah, we can get into all kinds of different, once again, nuances and factors and all that. But
yeah,
instead, let me talk about what I was going to talk about. So Alexander Hamilton supported a perpetual debt, and one of his excuses was that it would keep states from seceding. And this is the sidetrack I want to take, because secession is an interesting discussion. And I had a very deep, I don't know if it was a debate or discussion, but with someone who is an academic, has this nice little alphabet soup after their name, and a Hamiltonian. And they were upset about my talk about secession, that the states have the authority to secede. That Texas v. White, which goes back to, I think, what is it, 1869, Texas v. White, which is what some people will use as their authority, that secession is illegal, is an unconstitutional ruling, and that the states have a right to secede. And then this person argues to me, says, well, Doug, the whole point of the Constitution was a firm union. No, the whole point of the Constitution was a firmer union, which is different. The states did not give up their authority to exit the contract if it was breached. However, the purpose of the Constitution was to create a better union that they would be less likely to secede from. They, of course, Madison and all these guys wanted the states to hang on to the Union, to stay a part of it. They did not think secession was a good thing. But that does not mean that they believe that they couldn't secede, they being the states. In other words, while they did not want secession, they did not outlaw it. Secession was not something they should do, but it was something they could do as a result of the Constitution. And the reason why I bring all that up is because Alexander Hamilton's comment, it would be that having perpetual debt would make the state perpetual debt would make it less likely for the states to secede, is part of our evidence that they understood at that time that the states had every authority to secede. Even Hamilton was saying, well, they can secede, but we want to make it so that they're less likely to secede. And of course, this is a consolidated government kind of way of thinking of it. But so if the states have, are part of the debt, well, they'll be less likely to, because they'll have to pay their share. Well, I can tell you right now, if a state was seceding, they wouldn't be like, oh, by the way, here's what we owe you. But that's beside the point.
And just to hammer that home, having read the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers, which Doug and I are going through on Sunday nights with Alan Myers on Patriot Soapbox, I've also read the ratifying conventions of Virginia and New York, and I will assure you, the conversations that were had, if there was even the possibility that once you joined a union, you couldn't leave, the Constitution never gets ratified. It would
Right.
never. It would have been 0 out of 13 states that would have adopted it if that was the assumption.
Yeah,
And
state autonomy and sovereignty was a big deal.
Absolutely. And state secession, the first talk of it came from the Northeast colonies, because they said, the South was, basically, the economic engine of this, and we don't feel like we're not able to get our share of it. They were looking at seceding. I think it was almost 20 years in. It was the first talk of secession. It was from the North.
Yeah, well, there were 2 states in the North right before the war, before the War of 1812, that were discussing it also, not only because of the economic engine being down south, but the fact that as a country, the economy was not doing very well under with this central bank, the Bank of the United States, in place. And the economy was so bad that these 2 states, and I want to say it was Massachusetts and New York, their attitude was, we could run our own economics, our own finances better than this. But if we're going to run our own finances, we have to secede. And there was talk of secession with those two states, but the War of 1812 kind of interrupted that. And then there, of course, there's the story of Aaron Burr, who was trying to convince states to go to Canada.
I was just going to drop that factoid, but I just had the conversation yesterday about Aaron Burr, because it's an important conversation, because this is something people are talking about today because of Marjorie Taylor Greene's comments, which she's clarified that she's not talking about civil war. She's talking about going back to what she says is a constitutional republic, and she actually used the word federal republic, which boosted her in my eyes again.
Put a grin on your face, huh?
Well, yeah, but and the Dan Bongino show today, he did about 30 minutes on this, and he got a lot of it right. How difficult a national divorce would be at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
There's just, how do you separate the debt? What about defense? Who gets the nukes? All that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, we've got three major schools of thought in this country, and one of them wants to impose their will on everybody else. One of them just wants to be left alone. And I'm not going to, I don't even know how to describe what the establishment Republicans want, the Lincolnians. They want to keep it intact so they can continue to loot the system. But it needs to be fixed. These are conversations that are going to be more common, and we need to be educated on what we can and can't do. So I'm glad you spent the extra time on this, Doug. We need to be talking about this a lot more.
Yeah, we do. And it's funny because I used to be able to tell people I can get through the Constitution in 19 one-hour sessions, but now there's so many things to talk about. I don't think I'll ever do it in 19 weeks again. But it's not because I'm not a good instructor, it's just because I'm become a better instructor. I've gotten to the point where I'm understanding that we need to talk about certain nuances more than we did before. And this is definitely one of those things. And I appreciate having these gentlemen on the air with me, because you gentlemen definitely add to the conversation. When it comes to debt, also, we have to understand that money and monetary systems and the way they're established is very important. And later on in Article 1, Section 8, and I'm going to kind of go here real quick just for a moment. I won't go into the full explanation because I want to wait until I get there. But it says also that Congress shall have the power to coin money and regulate the value thereof, which is like the fourth one down from where we're at right now. That's important. And people say, well, I don't trust Congress to coin the money. Well, let me ask you this. If Congress is coining the money, who is not? The banks. Suddenly, the Congress coining money sounds a little better, doesn't it? Now, Congress coining money also would be a lot better if our Congress was in its original fashion of the way it was created. If it was in its original style of a Congress, a dissimilar bicameral Congress of two houses that are unlike each other, where the people in the states have a voice and their natural checks against each other, and that at the state level, the state legislatures are similar in the sense that they are dissimilar houses that are natural checks against each other, and then appointing the members of the Senate and involved with the approval of the federal spending. All of that would be important and would be a wonderful, coining money then would be a wonderful thing that Congress is doing. We don't trust today's Congress. I get it. I trust them more than I do the bankers, number one. And number two, if we got our system back in line, that is a system that works. It did work for quite a while.
I'm not sure that I would trust them if they were beholden to the banks, because if they were beholden to special interests, because then at that point, then they're just beholden to whoever owns them.
Right. Well, then again, if our Congress was populated the way it originally was, you wouldn't have that issue as badly. It would be harder to do because of the state legislatures having an oversight hand in the legislative process through the Senate, things like that. So once again, part of our distrust of Congress exists because the recipe is already messed up. We got to go back to the original recipe. So I get the distrust. It's like it's like when I was talking about the Electoral College in my video this morning. And I said, part of the reason why there's problems. Everybody said, well, there's difficulties, Doug. There's something going wrong, so we got to write these laws. Well, why is something going wrong? Because it's not even fashioned in the manner that originally was. It's not operating in its original manner. So of course there's problems because you've gone outside the recipe. So once again, the Congress would be a whole different animal if we were to go back to being a true federal republic.
So I'm a little bummed out right now because I've got to leave in about 10 minutes, and you're just about to get into the Commerce Clause, and I'm going to miss the good stuff. So this is one of my favorite parts about Doug's Constitution classes is the next section.
Well, let's go ahead and dive in and see if you can spend some time with it. So when it comes to the Commerce Clause, which is the next one down, go ahead and highlight it on Article 1, Section 8. And it says to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. Now, the Indian tribes being entities that are sovereign inside this country. So we trade with them just like we trade with other countries. So regulating commerce between the foreign nations, Indian tribes, all right, I get that. But what has happened when it comes to interpretation is that part that says among the several states is the interpretation is that the federal government has the power to control, restrict with law, and tax anything that crosses state lines for any reason because they regulate commerce among the several states. That's what we've been taught over and over and over. One of my favorite discussions about this, Wickard v. Filburn. Wickard v. Filburn, I think it was 1942, I want to say, was a case in which a wheat farmer had a low year, didn't send any wheat to market as normal, which would then cross state lines and go out into the market and all that jazz. And the family wound up consuming all of the wheat that they produced. And then they get this tax bill from the federal government and say, whoa, wait a second. We didn't send anything out into the market. It didn't cross state lines. We consumed all of our wheat. Therefore, we don't need to pay this tax. The federal government basically said, yes, you do. And so they sued the federal government, Filburn being the secretary of the part of government that was behind this. So Wickard v. Filburn. And so the Wickard family, they sue, gets all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court decides that when it comes to their situation, even though no wheat crossed state lines, it affected interstate commerce because it normally would cross state lines. And therefore, because it didn't, it negatively influenced interstate commerce. Therefore, that gave the federal government the authority to tax them on it because anything across the state lines or influences what crosses state lines, according to Wickard v. Filburn, falls under the regulation part of commerce. So yes, even back then, they thought as crazy as they do now, if not crazier. So now, if that's the case, we have to now look at boy, you're good. We have to look at the word regulate. What did they mean by regulate? Does it?
I've taken your class a few times, so I anticipate.
What does regulate mean? Now, if you look it up in the 2023 or 2022, now 2023 dictionary, the first and most common definition is going to say what the last one on what you see says. Not exactly the same words, but about the same words. To subject to rules or restrictions as to regulate trade and to regulate diet. So to subject to rules and restrictions. And then Wickard v. Filburn added to tax. So in today's dictionary, the most common definition of regulate is what would come to most people's minds. If you went out and talking to people on the street, hey, what does the word regulate mean when it comes to the government? Oh, it means for them to, impose rules and to impose rules and things like that through law. Okay, fine. So, and where they are listed in a dictionary is the commonality or the frequency, the prevalence of that definition. So in 1828 dictionary, which is what you see on your screen, that is the least of the three definitions that's listed. Now, if you look it up in today's dictionary, it is the first. Now, First definition, 1828, that has to do with weights and measures and flow and manners, interestingly enough. To adjust by rule, method, or established mode as to regulate weights and measures, to regulate the size of bread, to regulate our moral conduct by the laws of God's society, to regulate our manners by the customary forms. That is also the number one definition in today's dictionary, essentially the same: flow, weights, measures, things like that. Now, in today's dictionary, the next one, usually the third one down, or the second one down, or the fourth one down, depending on which dictionary, but it's above that one that has to do with no, I'm sorry, it's below. I mean, that one has to do with rules and laws and all that jazz. And it's usually often at the bottom on some of these is to put or keep something in good order, to put in good order. That's today's dictionary. In the 1828 dictionary, it's the next one, second. My point is this. The definition of regulate then was, when it came to the Commerce Clause, was to put in good order. The definition today is to subject to rules and regulations based on the rule of law or based on law that's been passed. So if indeed, and I'm going to use another constitutional anecdote to help us out understand this in a minute, but if in fact to put in good order is what they meant with regulate, suddenly the Commerce Clause becomes something different, because what it's saying then is not to impose with rules or restrictions or whatnot because it crossed state line. What it's saying is to regulate, to put in good order commerce among the several states. Well, and to put it in good order, what must it be? In bad order. So if it's not in good order, then the federal government can get involved to put it in good order. If it's in good order, then what's the government's job? Not to touch it, because it's flowing. It's in good order. So it's none of their business. Well, if it's out of order, it's in bad order, and they need to put it in good order, what does that mean? Well, that means, it goes back to the preamble, right? Domestic tranquility. That means to be a mediator. All right, guys, come on. We got to come to an agreement that you both agree on. Let's do this. Referee, mediator. So the federal government's job is to be a mediator with commerce if there's a dispute between the states. If there's no dispute between the states regarding commerce, none of the federal government's business. That's what the Commerce Clause means. Now, just to double down on this, to help you understand what I mean by this, let's go to the Second Amendment. Second Amendment says what? It says a well-regulated militia. There's that word regulate again. So if the word regulate means to put in good order, well, that actually makes sense, right? Because during the American Revolution, did the militia need to be controlled by government with rules and restrictions? No. What it needed was to be in good order. It was not in good order. You've got storekeepers and farmers shooting away and not hitting this broadside of a barn. They couldn't march. They were not properly trained. They were just militiamen. The militia was not in good order. They need to be properly equipped. They need to be properly trained. They need to have leadership. They need to know how to do what they were doing. So a well-regulated militia is a militia that's in good order. If we're using the definition from 1828 Webster's Dictionary to put in good order. So there you go. So to regulate commerce with foreign nations among several states, to put it in good order if there's a dispute, and with the Indian tribes. I one time gave this explanation in front of Chris Ann Hall, who was out 3-4 years ago. I think it's 2019 when she spoke at an event that I threw. And for those of you who know who Chris Ann Hall, you know she is pretty awesome when it comes to Constitution. And she walks up to me afterwards and she says, I thought I was the only person that talked about the Commerce Clause that way. Kudos. She was stunned that it was anybody else that got it. Because nobody is talking about it.
Well,
and this is something that needs to be understood.
The reason it's so important, and I've used this in the debates with people that are, big Ron DeSantis supporters, is Ron's doing fine as a governor, makes some great headlines. The follow through may or may not be there, but at the end of the day, the guy was in Congress. 99% of what Congress talks about is they use this Commerce Clause or the welfare clause to think that they have the right to do it, and they
Right.
don't. That they shouldn't be doing all this stuff. Every single thing they're talking about, these bills, they're 6 inches thick, 1,200 pages, what have you. They're all filled with stuff that is none of their darn business. And it's because of this, what we're looking at right now, the Commerce Clause. It's one of the most important parts about the Constitution to understand is all of this stuff was supposed to be left to the states. All of it.
And the two people that originally used this clause a lot for excuses, one was Hamilton, but especially John Marshall. He was all over using the Commerce Clause in the manner that we are seeing it being used today. And that was unconstitutional. It's not what was intended. The Commerce Clause was not intended to allow the federal government to throw their weight around every time something crosses state lines. Their only involvement is to be a mediator. Because remember, who existed first? The states. The states created the federal government, not the other way around. The federal government's not there to boss around the states. That's not its job. I know those who are firm believers of the 14th Amendment have adopted that way of thinking. That is not what the federal government's there for. The states are the ones that created the federal government. And when it comes to the Commerce Clause, it's a great example of how the states are supposed to take care of their own business. And if the federal government's get involved, it's not to be the boss, it's to be a mediator. Hey guys, I hear you having a problem. Let's talk about this.
Brady,
was
that along the lines of that passage that you shared to me out of the book from McClanahan?
100%.
Let me go get that. I'm gonna go get that.
Well, we all three have a copy of it now. Doug, did you ever finish that?
I am not quite done, but I am definitely in the process. Matter of fact, I have it right
it
here.
Wasn't the
because I'm still working on it.
Wasn't the nine? Was it the nine? It wasn't the one. The 9 presidents who screwed up America. I think it was one about the Hamiltonian curse.
It's how Alexander Hamilton screwed up America.
That's right. Yeah, by Brian McClanahan, and I'm almost done with it. And I'm wanting to hurry up and get done with it because I've started another book that some of you may be familiar with, The Harbinger, by Jonathan Cahn.
I don't know this one.
Yeah, it's a fictional novel, but it's very good and it ties what's going on today into this. It's a fun read. The Ancient Mystery that Holds the Secret of America's Future. But anyway, it ties into kind of not only what we believe as constitutionalists, but also as Christians. So,
fictional novel. Is it written by a New York Times?
Was that in the was that kind of in the at the beginning?
Yeah,
I sent you a screenshot of it if you want to look at your phone.
Oh, that's right, you did, didn't I? I could do it.
And matter of fact, I recommended this book along with Hamilton's Curse by Thomas J. Dale Lorenzo to my morning class this morning, my Fallbrook class. And the other two books that I recommended that they, if they can, get their hands on and read was The Unseen Hand by A. Ralph Epperson, which was written in 1984 and published in 84, actually. And FDR, My Exploited Father-in-Law by, why am I blanking on the name now? Dahl, Curtis B. Dahl. That's a fascinating read. And that one I am familiar with mainly because I think it was Ron, right? You're the one that first brought up. Was it you that first brought up that book? Who? FDR, My Exploited Father-in-Law?
Oh no, that was Skip.
Oh, that's right. No. Yeah.
No, was it Skip or Dennis?
No, it was Skip. Yeah. Matter of fact, Skip was at class last night, although he did get there a little late.
Well,
Skip is a fun guy to talk to too.
This is the paragraph, and I don't know where it is in the book.
All right. But so while you're doing that, Brady, glad you were here. Sorry, we're going to miss the last 10 minutes. Enjoy whatever you've got to do.
From Brady, he's going to want to hear this.
Yeah, I'll stick around for Ron. I'll stick around for Ron for reading.
Oh, he'll stick around.
Basically,
for you,
this
Ron.
is from. This was written by Abigail Adams.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Nor does the opinion of the unconstitutionality and consequent nullity of the law of that law remove all restraint from the overwhelming torrent of slander which is confounding all vice and virtue, all truth and falsehood in the United States. The power to do that is fully possessed by the several state legislatures. It was reserved to them and was denied to the government or to the general government by the Constitution according to our construction of it. While we deny that Congress have a right to control the freedom of the press, we ever have asserted the right of the states and their exclusive right to do so. They have accordingly, all of them, made provisions for punishing slander, which those who have time and inclination resort for the vindication of their characters. In general, the state laws appear to have made the process or made the presses responsible for slander as far as it is consistent with their useful freedom. In those states where they do not admit even the truth of allegations to protect the printer, they have gone too far.
It goes back to everything belonging to the states. It's up to states, and it's like I tell people when it comes to our rights. States have the authority to make laws regarding our rights. They're not supposed to go beyond certain limits that we are supposed to keep an eye on. We're supposed to control our state, but the federal government has no authority whatsoever on any of our rights. Period. And
guys, I gotta step out. You guys wrap it up. I'm gonna leave the page open, so when you guys end the show, I'll just sort of, I guess, go blank. But
okay,
that was the whole point of the state constitutions,
right? Well, exactly. Well, it's like I tell people: if the federal constitution applies to everything across the board and to the states on everything, then why do they have state constitutions?
Why do the states have a constitution?
So yeah, the logic is usually confusing to many people. All right, so now next clause down, the Congress shall have the power to establish a uniform rule of naturalization. In other words, when it comes to citizenship, becoming a citizenship through law, that's what naturalization is, rather than citizenship by birth. It is Congress's job to establish rules regarding naturalization that are evenly or uniformly applied throughout the United States. So in other words, if you go through the process to become a citizen, say in Connecticut, the process shouldn't be any different than if you were to do it through Arizona or California. The process, the paperwork, the fees, whatever it may be, the expectations, what you need to know, all of that is supposed to be uniform. Establish a uniform rule of naturalization and uniform laws on the subject of bankruptcies throughout the United States. Because the states were originally their own individual entities, sovereign, autonomous, their own little countries, what was happening often is someone might get into a little trouble, a little bankruptcy trouble. That's okay. I'll just move to Virginia from Massachusetts. I'll start all over again. It's not going to follow me. Well, now that they're together in a union and they're becoming a firmer union with this Constitution, the idea is when it comes to things like bankruptcy, the rules, the laws need to be uniform and recognized, and the bankruptcies need to be recognized by all the states as a union, because now your bankruptcy affects the country as a whole. And so uniform laws of bankruptcies. Then it says, and this is something we touched on earlier, and I do want to get into this before we skedaddle, to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and a foreign coin, in other words, the exchange rate. And what, like I said, if Congress is coining money, who's not? If Congress is regulating the value, who's not? The banks or a central bank. Right. Now, here's what's interesting about this. So we had the Bank of the United States, which Hamilton argued was constitutional. It wasn't. Jefferson argued against it. Then that charter expired in 1811. Then in 1816, a new charter for a second Bank of the United States was formed. That lasted for 20 years. And then under the Andrew Jackson presidency, the charter for the second Bank of the United States in 1836 was not renewed and ended. And then from that time until the Federal Reserve, we had no central bank. Congress coined the money, and we did just fine. In fact, we went through a lot of prosperity. We had our ups, we had our downs, but the economic system, the monetary system, the finances were better off. Now, that said, here's why this is important. Article 1, Section 1. Remember that? Article 1, Section 1. Article 1, Section 1 says what? All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress. Now, I like to emphasize that word vested. All legislative powers, and see what we're seeing here in Article 1, Section 8 are legislative powers that are being listed in this Constitution. These legislative powers are herein granted. They're in the Constitution, granted to Congress as an authority, as a legislative authority, shall be vested. Vested means that, number one, only they hold that power. In other words, only Congress can legislate regarding coining money, and it's irrevocable. Vested also means you can't give that power away. Oh, wait a second. But they gave it away to the Bank of the United States, the Second Bank of the United States, and the Federal Reserve. They violated Article 1, Section 1. If to coin money and regulate the value thereof is listed as a legislative power in Article 1, Section 8, and vested in Article 1, Section 1 means that it can't be given away, that it's irrevocable, separation of powers, then it's illegal, it's unconstitutional for something like the Federal Reserve to exist in the first place. That is important. The founding fathers did not want banks coining our money, regulating the value, or for the banking system of Europe to be involved in our affairs. The idea was to keep it close. It's like they say, keep everything close to your vest.
Mm-hmm.
To keep the coining of money and regulating the value thereof close to us, not allow outside entities to be monkeying with it. And that was against a growing trend that was going on in Europe at the time. The growing trend being central independent banking. Independent banking, centralized banking kind of earned its birth during the 1600s. Now, people say, oh, the Rothschilds. Well, the Rothschilds hadn't really grabbed hold of everything just yet. That was in process. Now, that said, the Rothschild family was already very strong. Nathan Rothschild, in fact, they say, and if Brady was here, he would definitely respond to this, ordered the War of 1812, largely because of America allowing its central bank that connected us to European banks to expire, to not be renewed, that charter not to be renewed. And so Rothschild family was involved in banking, but it wasn't the power that it became in the mid 1800s with the sons having their central banks in different parts of Europe and gathering and consolidating the power. That said, there were powerful entities in Europe, London especially, that had a grasp on that banking system, and they wanted the America to be tied into that banking system and tied into the legal system. Original 13th Amendment comes to mind. And and like I said, that banking system, Federal Reserve, Bank of the United States, violates Article 1, Section 8, where it says that Congress shall have the power to coin money and regulate the value thereof. Next clause, then it says, and fix the standard of weights and measures. Yeah, I know we've got this English standard, American standard system we use with feet and inches and yards. And to everybody else in the rest of the world, it makes no sense because they're on the metric system where everything's divisible by 10. But this is our system. This is what has been established. Congress has the authority to determine what that should be. And that's our system. And it's important for it to be a fixed system because that throughout the country. Could you imagine if, let's say, California was on the metric system and Arizona was on the American standard system, and New Mexico decided to just grab something that has to do with some ancient, ideas of measurements.
Don't they do that already?
Don't they do that already? And you've got a construction company. Hey, I used to work in construction, and we would go to Arizona, Nevada sometimes to do work. Well, guys, we don't use that system here. You're going to have to adjust everything. Maybe all kinds of problems, wouldn't it? So according to the Constitution, that system, whatever it may be, is determined by Congress. Now, what am I saying about the metric system? If Congress wanted to put us in the metric system, they could actually pass a law to do that. Now, they tried to do that back in the 70s. I remember when they tried to do this. And it wasn't very popular. We know what we know. We appreciate what we're used to. And so we continue to use the American standard system. Now, as Brady Warhamster might comment if he was still here is because he dives. He's a diver. And when it comes to, figuring out air and different calculations, metric divisible by 10 is something that you can do in your head a lot easier. And so that's what they use. But overall, that's our system. That's what we use. And it's Congress that determines it. And finally, I'm going to wrap us up with this last clause here, because I know we're about 2 minutes over. To provide for the punishment of counterfeiting the securities and current coin in the United States. Of course, Congress would have the authority to determine what the punishment should be. They're the ones that are coining the money. So when it comes to determining the punishments of counterfeiting it, of course, that would be given to Congress. Notice, though, it is to provide for the punishment. It is not to apply the punishment. The application of the punishment is a judicial action, and that must come through the court system. The legislature can say, this is what the punishment should be. This is what the maximum punishment is going to be. This is what the minimum or whatever. But the actual application of the punishment has to be through the court system, because they're the ones with the judicial powers. So there you go. Well, Ron, it's good to see you, sir.
You too. You too.
And all of you in the chat room. I appreciate you. Enjoyed the time with you. I'm going to mark my podcast constitution so I know where I left off. And I've got to head off to
San Juan Capistrano.
And the wife's going with me. And she says,
Again?
we're leaving at 4. I want time to eat. And I said, okay.
Again?
So,
didn't she go last week?
No, she didn't. No. She decided not to.
Okay.
But she's going this week. Yeah.
Going this
She,
week. Okay.
my wife, for those of you in the audience, it's kind of funny because usually when I lure her to a class or something like that, it's usually with food. It's the food that attracts her. I remember one time somebody asked her one time, hey, Virginia, you go to Doug's classes? She's like, why? He talks about it at home. But anyway, all right, guys. United we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends. God bless you. Don't forget to visit me at douglasvgibbs.com, politicalpistachio.com. New video this morning, youtube.com/DouglasVGibbs. Or you can go to BitChute or Rumble, same one. Douglas V. Gibbs would be the key word there. Ron, anything to say to everybody other than goodbye?
No. Just excited for baseball.
Oh, yeah, that's on the verge. Wait a second. Stop there. Now, I'm also a football fan. And I'm actually enjoying watching the new Rock-owned XFL. Have you watched any of it at all?
Not a second.
No, it's been fun. I'm enjoying the XFL. So, of course, because of my schedule, I watch the games after midnight.
I haven't. Honestly, my television hasn't turned on. I'll be honest with you. I didn't watch any of the NFL games, any of the NFL playoffs. I didn't watch anything. I mean, I can't say that I didn't see any of it because I was in places where they had games on. But as far as my television, not one time did I turn it on to watch anything.
Now, that said, the moment that a Dodger game comes on your television, you're going to be flipping it on, I'm sure.
I follow plenty of YouTube channels that talk about Dodger stuff and what's going on with players and teams and team news and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm up to date. But that's the only thing. That's the only thing that is non, politics or financial or whatever that I keep track of as a pleasant distraction.
Darren says he has the original XFL T-shirt. I have some XFL trading cards. I have World League of American Football trading cards. I even have some USFL trading cards. I'm into trading cards.
I actually went to the very first XFL game back in 2000 and what was it, 2002?
Yeah, I think it was 2001. But go ahead.
Back at the Coliseum. Mm-hmm. I was at the original game.
Was that? Yeah. Okay.
The LA. I don't remember what the LA team was. But I was at the LA game. Long time ago, 20 years ago.
All right, very good. All right, guys, it's been a pleasure spending the time with you. Thank you for the great comments. Chris says another great class. Michelle also says great class. See everybody next week. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes.
We'll see you guys next week. I'm off to Capistrano. God bless you, and stay constitutional. Bye-bye now.
See you guys. Thanks.